wonder if it'll get to the point where, in order to live this sort of life, vacations and travel are no longer an option for us. Hear me out. With every advancement, there's a poverty, right? So with the advancement of being able to take a photograph of a QR code to read your menu, there's now the poverty of, okay, but like, what if someone came and brought me something that was written on cardboard? And is that still an option? Well, it is now, but maybe in 5 years it won't be. Can I board a flight? Do you print out tickets anymore? Well, right now you do, but it's kind of awkward. But 20 years, maybe you won't. I wonder if it's going to get to the point where, in order to live a radical Christian life, we'll have to detach from technology to such a degree that we don't take vacations anymore. We don't. What do you think? Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do.
Because it's getting to the point where it feels increasingly difficult to live in modern society without a phone.
I think that'll be okay. Christians should live differently than the post-Christian world in which they move.
Amen.
We should be different. We were for a long time, and we need to be different. And so if that means that there are certain things we don't do, certain practices we don't engage in, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's almost like Christians. If we think that I'm a Christian because I have sex differently to the world, or I view sex, that seems like the litmus test, right? Because it's like, well, how do you spend your money? It's like, well, you kind of do what the world does. I could give to some charities, and I invest in 401ks and things like this. And I'm not condemning that here. I'm just saying the way we use our money isn't terribly different.
Right.
The way we use technology, is that different? Well, I don't watch porn. Again, that comes down to the sex thing. That makes me uncomfortable, that I view am I being a Christian with what am I doing with my genitals, which is incredibly important, right? But then it's like, well, what about every other aspect of my life?
It's the bare minimum,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, like what am I doing with my technology use? How do I look different to the world? How do I spend my money? I mean,
not to rely on C.S. Lewis too much, but there's
he's a good person to rely on.
There's a I can't remember which book it is. Maybe it's Mere Christianity. He talks about the about tithing, about giving, and that the Christian life, that we make a mistake. I'm paraphrasing him. I'm sure one of your viewers will find the reference, but we make a mistake in thinking that we can give our bit as though we're paying our taxes, and then just be satisfied that we've done our bit, and then we can enjoy the rest of our money as we see fit. When the reality is, Christ calls us to give everything, to take up our cross, and to die to ourselves. That's what we're called to do. So there is no giving your little bit and then sitting back and being satisfied and saying like, oh well, I don't watch porn, so I'm okay, and I'm okay, and I'm just going to doom scroll. No, you're not okay. Like, that's not enough. That's not going to be enough, and it's certainly not going to be enough in the world that we are walking into right now. We are going to have to figure out a kind of radical Christianity that walks away from a lot of modern pagan life. And it's going to take forms that go far beyond just how we view sex or how we view marriage or being against abortion, because the world that we're up against, like the ascendant new paganism, is going to come after everything. And they're going to say, you will affirm your child's gender identity, or we'll take your kid away from you. Now, if you live in a state where that becomes law, you may have to leave. You may have to pick up and move. You may need to move to a rural area or to a new place. And when you do that, you need to find a Christian community to become a part of. We can't allow this isolation to continue. The isolation of the digital age, the isolation of the machine. We have to fight it. How do you fight it? By living in community with other Christians. Now, at the risk of sounding too Benedict option-y, right?
I don't know. I think you can sound Benedict option-y enough. I'm a big proponent of that book. And I think most people, I know you don't, but I think most people misunderstand that book. Like we're saying, let's all turn in on ourselves and F the world.
Right.
That's not at all the point.
Well, right. So the last chapter of my book, I titled The Boniface Option, right? What did St. Boniface do? He chopped down the sacred oak tree, and that in front of a crowd of pagans that were like howling at him, right? So the point of being in community isn't to retreat. The point is to, again, find the ground that you can win on and fight there and win, right? So, right. I talk about this example in Taylor, Texas, which is just north of Austin. What happened there last year with their Christmas parade?
I don't know.
It was essentially infiltrated by like the LGBTQ by an astroturfed LGBTQ group that came in from Austin that demanded to have like a couple of like transgender guys on a float, and the old ladies who like approved it, they didn't realize that the name Taylor Pride they just thought it was like they didn't know what it was until it was too late. And there was an outcry. And so the coalition of pastors and churches that sponsored the parade said, okay, this year we're only going to allow floats that have like, that are compatible with Christian, teaching. And the city, this is a small conservative town. The city said, no, that's not acceptable. You have to accept everybody. So you can have your parade, and then the city will sponsor its own holiday parade, inclusive holiday parade that will be on the same night, right behind your parade on the same route. So what that kicked off was a battle for the city council in that town. And rightly so. The Christians in that town have to take over the city council now and get this kind of thing out of their town. That's ground that they can win on, and they're
God bless them.
A friend of mine, Kevin Stewart, who's a resident there. He wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal after this happened. I wrote about it for the Federalist. I talked to him about it and quote him in the book. They are organizing. The Christians in that town are organizing to take over the city council, because the city council is on the side of the gay kind of lobby in that town, and the activists from Austin that are trying to infiltrate it, to infiltrate the town and take over the library and take over the public schools. You have to take those things back. Now, you're not going to take back the Austin City Council, but maybe you can take over the city council in Taylor, Texas, right? That's what I mean by fighting on ground you can win. It's not enough to just be in your church or in your community and with your sort of co-religionists, right? You have to take back the public institutions that you can, and take them back for Christ and for His church, and say, we're going to have a Christmas parade in this town, and we're not going to have any drag queen floats, and that's going to be the law in this town. And that's how we're going to organize our little polity here. And
so you take back that land and you keep it for as long as you can, but it seems to me that you think you won't be keeping it for long.
I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know what we have to do now.
Yeah.
What we have to do now is create these beachheads and create these spaces, not just in our, as I said, not just in our private faith communities, but we have to push that out into the public square, into the civic space too, and say, in this town, our library is not going to carry these books. Our public school is not going to teach these things. We're not going to allow these kind of displays in our county. And you extrapolate it out from there. And we're not going to allow these kinds of surgeries for minors in our state. We're not going to allow doctors to perform these kind of surgeries. And if you do, you go to prison or you lose your medical license. We have to start fighting back because the left, the pagans, whatever you want to call them, they are not going to stop until someone stops them. And so when I say the Boniface option, I'm not disagreeing with Rod, who's a friend of mine and who wrote, and who's a great writer and a great thinker. I'm saying, to the extent anybody misunderstood his argument, let's be clear. We have to chop down the sacred oaks of the pagans. over and against what they want us to do. We don't owe them any deference. We don't have to tolerate them. And where we can, we should take back ground that they've taken.
As of we're recording this, just yesterday, the UK blocked puberty blockers.
Right.
Did you see that?
I did. And surprised to say, but good for the UK. I kind of view the UK as like a dying, a dead civilization. It more than America. They're a little bit further down the road. We're talking about a place where you get arrested for praying silently outside an abortion clinic, right? So I'm surprised that they took that step, but I'm also not surprised. And I wrote about this today in the Federalist at the recent cover of New York Magazine, which makes the case for freedom of sex, and it's written by a quote unquote trans woman. Right?
What does that mean? Freedom of sex?
This article makes the argument that we should not condition transgender, medical interventions, what they call gender affirming care, on any kind of medical diagnosis, or really on anything other than the desire of a man, woman, or child to transition to the opposite sex, and that doing so, putting these criterias on it, is the wrong approach. And the reason that they're making that argument is because countries like the UK are backtracking on this stuff and saying like, oh, there's not. In other words, they're saying you shouldn't have to provide any evidence for these medical interventions or these surgeries. If a 12-year-old wants to be castrated or sterilized, they should be allowed to do that over and against the objection of their parents. And there shouldn't be any evidence required for that. And they're making the case that is a fundamental human right, right? Getting back to the idea of rights. What a disfigurement of reason that is. In other words, that we should be able to create ourselves, and the author actually uses those terms at the end of the article, and not subject to any outside scrutiny, right? But they're doing that because they see that if you hang the transgender movement on sort of medical or scientific evidence, it's not going to work because there is no evidence that it makes people happy, or that
it makes you the opposite sex. You've just butchered yourself, and now you're at best aping them, but will never be a woman.
Or that there's any good measurable outcomes, right? So that they can see that they have to base their argument on something else, and what they're basing it on is will and desire. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing is true.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.